Hi, greetings. It's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and today I wanted to talk about something that probably all of us have experienced over and over again in our lives, at least into some degree. And we're talking about conflict. Conflict is simply seeing things from different perspectives. And conflict is a physiological response to when things aren't meeting our expectations, and similarly it causes stress, and so stress and conflict, they often go hand in hand. And as I'm famous for saying, it really is all about perspective. Everything is a matter of perspective, or almost everything, of course. And so when you are thinking about conflict, you really have to understand what it is that conflict is and have the right perspective on how to approach conflict in order to create outcomes that will be beneficial for you, of course, and for the other person that's in conflict with you. Because sometimes conflict really doesn't have to be this big, hairy, scary deal. It could simply be a conversation about seeing things differently. And that's good, because seeing things differently means that there's other perspectives that need to be considered and hopefully valued if you really value other people. And I know that some people don't value people as much as people would like to be valued, and that's your own choice. But if you want to be able to navigate conversations that help come to meaningful conclusions that lead to big-term better relationships, you have to learn how to manage conflict properly. And so that's what this lesson is about today. And of course, if doing it right actually will lower your level of stress. So when I was in grad school, I had a student that took a lot of the same classes, doctoral classes, with me. And one of our very first conversations that we had is he told me that he had spent many years in prison. I think he said 8 years in prison. And then he went on to talk about how he had a psychology background. And with that background, he actually used it in a confrontation that he had. And I'm like, oh, tell me more about it. So apparently in Seattle, we have these very tall skyscraper buildings. Not a lot of them, but a few of them. And he would just happen to be on the ground floor of one. And the elevator door opened, and he was going to go up to the top floor, or something like that. And there was another man that was at the floor with him, and he described the man as being about the size of a refrigerator. 7 foot tall, 300 pounds, big guy. Anyway, with the doors open, and there was a sign that said no smoking. And they both looked at the sign together and then looked at each other looking at the sign together. They got in the elevator and the door closed, and guess what happened? The big refrigerator guy reaches into his coat pocket, pulls out a cigarette, lights it up, and blows it into the face of my friend. And of course they were in an elevator, and my friend, being a gentleman like myself, he said, "Excuse me, sir, did you see the sign that said no smoking?" And the big refrigerator guy replied, "Why, yes, I did. What are you going to do about it?" Seemingly looking down at the man. And so my friend did something that kind of surprised me, as he reached up into the guy's face, grabbed the cigarette, broke it in half, and threw it on the ground. And he looked back up at the guy and said, "Now what are you going to do about that?" And he said, "Paul, it was the quietest elevator ride that I'd ever had." And I think about that all the time, because there's a lot of things that come into play here. And you may have guessed that this big refrigerator guy's way of being, and I call it winning formula, is to push his way around and establish his physical presence. I get my own way because of my size, and no one questions it. But this man didn't do a darn thing, and I'm not suggesting that this is the warning label. Don't do this. But this man didn't do anything, because I think it really surprised him. I don't think anybody had ever called him on it before, and he didn't know what to do. And of course, he didn't know whether or not my friend knew karate or was carrying a gun or something concealed. But the fact of the matter is that my friend handled conflict in what I would call an assertive way. Some people may say, no, that crosses the line of assertive and becomes aggressive. Well, I'm not saying fight violence with violence. I don't condone violence or any negative actions at all. But this lesson really is about applying the principles of assertive conversation. You know, we all have the right to be respected and to feel respected. We don't need to demand it, but we need to model it. And usually when we model something in a way, in an approach that can be received well, it helps lower conflict or chances of conflict happening. And so I just ask that you consider that conflict is always going to happen. It's merely two or more individuals who see things differently. And I think that's a good approach to handling conflict. It's simply saying, wow, maybe it's with your spouse. Wow, sweetheart, we really see things differently. Can you tell me more about your perspective? I really want to understand where you're coming from. And some may say that just sounds like an unnatural approach. You don't have to use those words, but your body language really needs to mirror the authentic feeling that you really do want to understand things differently, and putting it out there, whoa, we don't see things the same way. That's okay. I may have the wrong perspective. Help me understand. And then if you let me, I'll share my perspective if I still don't see things on the eye to eye with you, because I'd love to get there with you where we can come up with a conclusion that really works for both of us. Does that seem fair? So having an inquisitive attitude as you approach conflict, and being respectful and being soft as you approach things. Hitting conflict with a loud voice and a mean, nasty face isn't gonna help you accomplish your goal. Your goal really should be to come up with what we like to call a win-win solution. It's got to be a win for everybody involved, including yourself. But you can't settle for anything less than a win-win for both of you. So if you're in the workplace, you got to remember that conflict is healthy. If there's no conflict, it probably means that the leader usually, or someone involved on your team, is so scary and unapproachable that nobody wants to even bring differing ideas to the table. No conflict or low conflict is not a healthy sign, because we're all different and we all bring different perspectives into things, because our environment is that we are growing in from any age up to the point that you're interacting in. That will shape your perception and your experiences. And those are valuable, or could be valuable, in a conversation, especially when you're working on, common objectives. So coming to common solutions really requires making sure that you facilitate conversations in a respectful way. And in a way, anything less than being respectful and assertive is not going to get you a true win-win solution. So the key is one, thinking win-win. You want to have the perspective that you want the other person really to feel like that they were respected and that their ideas were truly considered. Two, because it's win-win, you have to win too. You have to figure out what you are willing to accept. And it's got to be good for you, and it's got to be good for the other person. It can't be a compromise. Compromise is not win-win, and that's one problem with society, is too often we say, let's take the easy way out. Let's just compromise. I'll give up this, and you give up this, and we'll both be losing. See, compromise is lose-lose. Win-win is a perspective of, I want the best for you, and I also want the best for me. What other alternatives are there that we can come up with mutually that we agree upon that work for both of us? without compromise. That's the hardest thing, because we really have to get over the programming that compromise is good. Sometimes, if we can really stay in the conversation long enough because we're being respectful and considerate, which means you're considering the ideas of other people, that then you're going to be able to come to those conclusions that really benefit everybody involved. So don't compromise. Don't be so accommodating that you're losing. And here's the big thing here. When you're in conflict, you got to remember that there will always be stories, and then there will be facts. And sometimes stories can look like facts. Let me give you an example. Oh, don't take Dr. Paul Gerhardt's class. He's a terrible professor. Nobody gets an A out of his class. His work is too hard. Fact of the matter is, lots of people earn A's in my classes, but not everybody is willing to do the work. And usually, I hope all of my classes, the work that I give is assigned so that you can learn the concepts. Can you imagine taking a math class and going, oh, this is easy. I learned this without doing any homework. But all the concepts usually build on each other. And learning is what we know about learning. There's a reflection process. And you have to be exposed to the right content. And then you have to be able to reflect upon it in order to have the right understanding of materials. And so you don't just get A's for going through the motions. You earn A's college by reflecting and showing understanding and mastery, because A is a representation of mastery of the majority of the concepts. And you don't just get mastery of concepts by attending a class every once in a while. You got to engage in the materials. You got to engage in conversations and thoughts and assignments that help give you a better, fuller understanding of the concepts. And so if you've got other people that say, yeah, I heard that too, that doesn't make something a fact. That makes it two people's opinion or three people's opinion or however many people there are on something. But an objective person will take a step back and say, well, what are the facts? Do you have any evidence to prove this? Because that sounds like a story to me. So, taking a look at real facts will help you come to conclusion. Don't focus on feelings when you're in a... It helps to be able to own your own feelings. I feel this way when you do this. Oh, thank you. Well, let me give you another perspective on things, because that's not how you should feel about this, because this is why I do that. Focusing on facts helps support kind of concepts and conceptualizing where you may need to go better to help you understand the best decisions, because everything is related to the decisions that you make. And you got to stay in the conversation longer. This is Burns' transactional analysis. This is really kind of interesting to understand. When you approach something, Burns suggested that we have essentially three different ego states: a child ego state, a parent ego state, and then an adult ego state. And we, throughout our day, can fluctuate throughout these different ego states. But when you're interacting with another person, you have to recognize which ego state that they're in and give a support ego state with it in order to bring it to an adult ego state. An adult-to-adult complementary transaction is the only way that you can come to mutual conclusions that are truly win-win. If somebody says, "That's not fair, I can't believe you're doing that," that obviously was a person that's interacting in a child ego state. If you want to make sure that you bring it up to a win-win, you might say something like, Now, Jennifer, when I said that for the purpose of helping you understand the concepts, and you can't learn concepts unless you do the homework. You've got to read the chapters before coming to class. So I just took on the parent ego state because I recognized the student in this case was acting in a child ego state. And then I'll do this. Have you taken other college classes, Jennifer, where the concepts were new to you before and the professor wasn't able to share all the content in the hour that he had in class, and so you kind of were responsible for making sure you studied the material? Don't I always ask, come and see me if you have any questions? I'm here to help, and I mean it. Do you not think I'm not here to help you? Because I am. I hope I want you to know that. I really am. But you got to ask, because I don't read minds. Do you read minds? Of course you don't read minds. But how can I help you understand things better? So I've just lowered the level of conflict, and I've brought it into an adult to adult ego state. Learning is an active process. So making sure that you realize that you can help facilitate levels of your own stress and conflict and the stress of others by being assertive in conversations, maintaining mutual respect. It's no time to throw fire on top of fire. Anger is a physiological response, and so if you are feeling angry, know that you can't have a conversation, or you're probably going to say something that you're going to regret later that could damage relationships in the longer run. So pull yourself aside, say, hey, I want to have the conversation with you, but I want to be able to approach it in a mature, respectful way, and I promise you I'm going to listen. 2, listen, paraphrase back what you heard. This is what I'm hearing from you, Jennifer, if I've got this right. Did I get that right? I agree on these points, or I don't agree on these things, and I hope I'd like to tell you why, if you wouldn't mind. Or I agree with these points, and I'd love for you to consider. See, they have to have the right to consider it. And stay in maintaining a soft voice. What do you think? They have to be able to choose it. You have to force it on them. You have to be assertive, but you have to have the conversation. You have to lay out the facts, focus on the facts, help paint the picture with data and facts. And then you've got to give the opportunity to the other person to be able to choose it on their own. And it's got to be win-win. Anyway, I hope that helps you navigate conflict and maintain levels of healthy stress. Stress can be healthy. It does move things forward, but it can also sabotage relationships and our perception of people. So you need to take responsibility for your own actions. You can't own what's not yours to own, but you do have the ability to help facilitate conflict in a healthy way that gets positive results. I'm Dr. Paul Gerhardt. Have a great day. You get to choose how you feel.